We're excited this season to release a series of interviews that we were able to do in October of 2025 with folks around the nation of Scotland. Uplift is partnering with a lot of recovery organizations and churches in the country of Scotland, and their stories, their people, their situations are so similar to us that you're going to be helped just by hearing about the work that's going on, not just in our own backyard, but around the world as well. What is it that you think kind of defines what you do?
I'm a follower of Christ, and I show people love and kindness in any part of their life, and in every part of ours, whether that be us as a couple and in church settings or in work. So yeah, first and foremost, I think that's always our priority, is to show Christ's love to others.
I mean, pretty much what Kirsty just said there. We look to provide care or demonstrate care to people that quite often can't do that for themselves, to themselves. Mm-hmm. Simple as that.
Yeah, I love that. So, how did you end up where you are doing the work that you're doing? You're laughing. You both have the same last name, but I bet you have different ways of getting to the place that you are right now. So I'd love to just know a little bit about how you...
Slightly different.
How you got here.
Yeah.
And then how you got to where you're doing this together, side by side like this.
Will we do the whole how we met, or will we do the whole where you fell in love with me?
Oh, let's not. Well, I'm not from Dundee, so I moved up. I worked within the National Health Service as a community nurse, and I moved from just outside Glasgow to northwest Perthshire. And the church I was involved with in Perth, I was invited to come along to a soup kitchen that was being run in Dundee by a really lovely Christian man, Mike Cordner. Him and his wife had set it up. So I started coming through, absolutely fell in love with it. I was a very reluctant participant to start with. And the very first night that I went along to the soup kitchen, I met Mark. Who was at the other side of the table to what I was. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
How did you
can tell your part.
I guess that's what that was the nudge,
yeah.
I think. Now you have to tell your part.
So I found myself in Dundee following quite a lengthy process of rehabilitation. I'd had quite a bad accident in which I'd shattered my leg and became quite vulnerable as a person themselves. Beforehand, and for a period of time after that, I wasn't a very nice person. I'd looked to dominate people. I'd been in addiction for around about 20 years, and had used my size and my aggression to benefit me in many ways. I came through to Dundee because I couldn't look after myself through in Perth, and there was some not very nice people looking to introduce some very sharp objects into my body because they found it that I wouldn't have been able to stop them. So Dundee for me was kind of like my Mexico. I kind of ran for the border and hid through here. I found myself in a hostel, found myself surrounded by alcohol and drugs again, and pretty much dove back into it without a second thought. This ate up all my money and everything like that. I didn't have the ability to do simple tasks such as even just feed myself. And I'd been told by somebody just sitting in a lounge in the hostel about these Christians that showed up on a regular basis just along the street with a soup kitchen that you could get something to eat with and you could have a wee chat. Hand on heart, I hated Christians back then. But God's got a sense of humour, has he? So I'd go along, I'd argue with Mike or Ricky, but I knew that they wouldn't really judge me. They'd always look to make sure that they provided for us. And this started me kind of going along. I knew that it was almost a safety net for me to go along I mean, when I say argue, it wasn't like me standing there shouting the odds or anything. Like, I would purposely read up on something beforehand and then go along and say, but your Bible says this.
Right.
And then that kind of kept me going along to the soup kitchen, and then one night Kirsty showed up, and she was just a wee wido, to be quite honest.
You might need to explain what a wee wido is, because that's it's a very Scottish
I'm from
terminology.
America. You're going to have to translate that for me.
I'm sure America's got widos. What is the definition of it? It's just, she's just annoying,
Okay.
to be quite honest.
Sarcastic.
Me. Okay. Now I know. You just described me, so this is fine.
But yeah, stemming from that, so everybody else, and Kirsty takes great delight in saying this to people quite often, so I'll steal her thunder a wee bit. With the likes of the other people that were at the soup kitchen, whether it would be Mike or Ricky, you're not going to budge them from what they believed. They are very much followers of Christ. They are very much out there because they feel that that's pretty much what Christ would be doing for people at this point, and making sure that they're provided for, showing them, demonstrating love and care, and being that friendly ear, and hopefully pointing them in the direction of the cross. With Kirsty, I seen an opportunity to, I think I said that I was going to make you wobble or something like that, or I thought that I could get you to at the very least admit that you sat on the fence. The reason I done this wasn't just a game for me. I'd been raised in a family in which religion existed but faith didn't. I'm not entirely sure if you've got this in America, but across here you're either blue or you're green. You're either Protestant or you're Catholic. You're either a Rangers fan or a Celtic fan, or one of the teams that comes from that. And it creates a big divide. So religion for me growing up was a way to separate myself and my people from other people. It was a divisive thing. I had no understanding of faith. My family had a great sense of humour, so for as much as we were Protestant, they sent me to a Roman Catholic school, which was fun, especially on sports days when you were allowed to wear a Rangers top and everybody else came in wearing Celtic tops, and it was like time for a Rammy.
That's how it feels. So, just as an example, so we live in the South in America. College football's the thing, and we live in Tennessee, but I was born in Alabama, and so I wear my Alabama colors in this whole orange state, and I get all sorts of nasty looks, and it's super fun.
It's fun. So, I mean, my experience of, I suppose, people of faith more stem from my school years, in which we had religious education, we had people coming in and everything to speak on topics from the Bible, and I hated them. They came across in a way in which they were judging me. They were telling me that I was living in a wrong way, and yeah, fair enough, I was living in a wrong way, but there's a better way to go about and saying it. So when I used to go along, and I'd done this with pastors through in the Church of the Naz through in Perth, I would read up on whether it was a bit of the Bible alongside a bit of Dawkins, and then walk in and say, but, you know. And I was angry at God, but at the same time, I'd probably class myself as an atheist. So that kind of shows you my mentality at the time. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm angry at a thing that I say that doesn't exist.
Your words are saying, I don't believe this thing is, but the emotional connection to it,
I suppose,
is more that you were opposed to it more than...
If I look at it honestly, nowadays I think it was fear. I think a lot of it stemmed from fear. Some of the stuff that I was doing, the way I was, the fact that I didn't acknowledge the cross, but I still had this kind of vague understanding or vague thought that there was something after this. And it's rolling the dice, is it? It's one of those where if I am wrong, then literally I've got hell to pay. You know, that's the course that I was on. And because that fear existed, because I suppose I I was scared, not necessarily of other people, but I was scared of myself in some ways, which I demonstrated by just being this horrible person. And then Kirsty comes along and she wasn't scared. And
so you tried to wobble her and she didn't wobble?
No. She, I think it was the day of my baptism, she had a right good laugh about the fact that
God had won.
Yeah. So, and let's say God's got a sense of humour. I kind of equate it to, people turning around and saying, well, if God exists, why did you go through 20 years of addiction and have this horrible time and everything like that? Realistically, God trained me for what He wanted me to do, in which, without that understanding, and I'm not saying people without that kind of experience can't do the job that I do, but without that understanding, without having lived that course, I definitely wouldn't be in the role that I am just now. I definitely wouldn't have the opportunities that I have just now. I definitely wouldn't have the wife that I have just now. I definitely wouldn't be in the church that I have just now, or hopefully for the next while. So for as much as you can look at it as, you had this horrible time in which life was just a very dark and angry place, or you can look at it as nothing that's worth having is easy to get. And what I have nowadays, which is a trust in God, a faithful wife, a roof over my head, all these things came to me because at a point a few years back, I bent the knee, I submitted, I realised that under my own steam and under my own direction, I was doomed pretty much.
I'm just curious, what was your perspective on him at that beginning point and how that changed?
I couldn't stand him.
I've heard this story now. Now it's your turn. You can share.
I dreaded seeing. So Mark was part of a double act with our friend Gary, and you could see the two of them lumbering up the street, and I would try and hide, stand in the middle of the table surrounded by other people because they would just hone in. But I think, you kind of have learned to think very quickly on your feet, and this was never a work that I had ever envisioned myself doing. I'd never had a passion for it. I really didn't want to be involved in it at all, and just being perfectly honest. And I think it really annoyed me when I enjoyed it so much and enjoyed the people that we met. But Mark and Gary and others were just so challenging because, it wasn't what they were doing or what they were saying. It's the fact you could see their potential and they couldn't see it in themselves, or they were not willing to admit that actually they're where they are just now because of the choices they had made. And the one thing they really didn't like was being challenged on that as well. So for as much as, they came to be like, oh, we could make your faith wobble, I was like, okay, well then if you're going to try that, then I'm going to just ask you really challenging questions about how you're living your life just now. So yeah, it was. I used to try and very much avoid, but yeah. And then to be fair, we struck up a friendship. I mean, you were going through you were going through a court case at the time, and you would just come into the drop-in and have a chat about it. And Mark shared no aspect of his life with anybody. So the fact that he was kind of starting to share stuff with Mike and I was quite a big step, and we made sure to tell him every time he was in that we were praying for him, and that seemed to really annoy him as well. So, people were praying for Mark for years before he ever, let the guard down a bit. And I think probably prison was the big turning point, because you were so desperate for communication, and the communication you were getting was all from Christians. Mm-hmm. And to be able to then see, that actually, and it's not a great way to describe it, but you have a captive audience, but it is, and Mark was just wanting to read letters and have that connection with people. And so we were just making sure we were sending in loads of Bible verses and, the fact that we were praying for him, and that others were as well. And
So were you in prison for a new offense that had occurred, or was this like something that was just kind of, you've been working through a process and you found yourself in prison after that? Or?
Went through a court case that lasted the best part of 2 years. I'd moved from the hostel. I'd ended up in a scatter flat, temporary accommodation. And I was still taking drugs. I was starting to isolate myself, thinking in some ways that was a good thing because it meant that I was spending less time with other people taking drugs. But the drugs were still there, so I was isolating myself and taking drugs. So in some way I was feeding my greed, not my need at the time, if that makes any sense.
It's like you were finding connection, but you're just finding your community through your drugs instead of the people around you.
So I was walking down the street one night. It was late on. There's a 24-hour bakery that everybody knows in Dundee, and I knew that I had money in. So my intentions around about, I think, 1 o'clock in the morning was to go and treat myself. I probably hadn't eaten properly in a couple of days. I'd just been taking drugs, and I heard footsteps running up behind me. So it's dark, it's on a back street. If you hear footsteps running up behind you, you turn and you're ready for bear, basically. It turned out to be somebody that I knew quite well. He had just been robbed. He knew the person that robbed him, and I decided, for whatever reason, to go down and have a chat with this person. So I went down to their house. I won't go into detail about really what went on in the house, but needless to say, it wasn't nice. I came away from there, went and got my burger, and went back up the road. About an hour later, the door is getting battered. There's possibly the biggest dog I've ever seen in my life. 8 police officers, lights getting shone in my face and everything like that because of my actions that night, and that, let's say, led on to a lengthy court case that just kept on getting put on and then put off. And at one point I was looking at quite a lengthy sentence, and it worried me. It really did. I mean, I knew that on many levels I could take care of myself, but this was almost like the last piece of evidence to say that that's the kind of person I am. That I'm not the kind of person that should be allowed to associate with nice people and all this kind of stuff, because I was not a nice person. When I eventually did enter into the jail, I'd only, for as much as the life that I had lived, I'd dodged the jail. I was Teflon for so long. I'd done wee remands and everything like that, but never for any length of time. And now I find myself entering in, and because of the type of crime it was, it meant that at first they categorised me alongside people that had ended people's lives. And it gives you pause to think, because there's a lot of time to do that in the jail. When your Peter door closes and everything, and you're left alone with your co-pilot, you've got a couple of options. You can either watch mindless TV, you can read, or you can talk. There's no many other options once the door closes. After a couple of months, you've heard all he's got to say, pretty much. So you start to figure out exactly who you are. I remember my personal officer turning around to me in the first couple of days that I was in, and pretty much saying along the lines, I don't care how hard you think that you are, but in the cold hard light of the dawn or midway through the night, there will be times where you'll reach some of your lowest points. I want you to reach out to me, because they were genuinely worried that you're going to harm yourself. And I started thinking to myself, is that the kind of person I am, that when it gets really tough that I just check out, So I started to work on myself. As other people, drugs are so easy to get a hold of in the jail, and I had went in with a mindset that was quite happy to hide within them. I started to change my mindset in which this is not a place that I want to be. We're only here for a certain amount of time. So how about we start changing the person that we are so this isn't our future? One of the first people I spoke to, I'd been out of Perth, the city that I'd lived in beforehand, for over 5 years at this point. And one of the first people that I spoke to was a past man in the jail. And he came up, and I knew him from outside. And he's asking me all the questions about some of the boys that we used to go about with. And I realised that he is so out the loop. Some of the people that he spoke about had been dead for 3 years. Some of the people had moved on. He didn't realise that I had moved. And I was, what have you been like? He's all been in jail. He had been in pretty much solid for, at that point, about 6 years. It's nowhere I wanted to be. So I started to ask myself questions. If this isn't where I want to be, where do I want to be? Started to educate myself. Stayed away from the opportunities to have not to take drugs. Done workshops, went down to education. And I thought,
was all this happening at the same time that you were also getting communications from Christians and stuff while you were in jail?
I mean, she says Christians, but realistically, the only person that I spoke to regularly was Kirsty.
On the phone, but a lot of folk wrote into you.
People wrote into me, but I'd done my time without visitors. I didn't want people coming in, because if you see somebody coming in, you've got to see them leave as well.
Right.
And the idea of they get to go and have a life, and I get to go and maybe get a game of pool later on or something like that, but go back to a bed that I didn't really fit in. And
So was that consistency, that kind of continued communication from Christians, what really won you over by the end? Was it just that consistent effort, or
no?
You've got to be honest as well, though. You've got to be honest about your.
I don't know. So I done my time, and I came out. I've got this licked. I've got everything under control. The hardest thing that I've got to do is remember the passcode for my phone, which I couldn't remember at that time, and contain my emotions when I had a chili cheeseburger, because I hadn't tasted anything like that for a wee while. Came through with all the promises that I'd made to myself, and that was the big thing. That's what really, that kind of crushed me later on. It's all right in some ways in that life to make promises to other people if you're going to benefit by breaking that promise. But the promises that you make to yourself, which is I'm staying away from the drugs, I'm going to do something, I'm going to get myself into education, I'm going to further this opportunity that I now have to actually create a life. I was still very far from God at this point. I came back to Dundee, and one of the first things that I did was walked into an off licence and bought a litre of vodka. When I woke up the next day, the first thing that I'd done was buy 1.5 litres, and that just continued. At the same time, I'd been told that I was about to lose the house that I was in, that I needed to find someplace else to stay. So, of course, my mind was set on sorting that all out. But first, we'll just go and get 1 litre of vodka. And then the next day, it's like, right, we really need to get this sorted out. But before I can handle people, I'll just go and get some more vodka. And it was dodging. Kirsty was calling me at this time because nobody was really seeing me. And for whatever reason, there was one night where I was sober. I hadn't smoked anything either. And Kirsty phoned me up and she was like, look, there's this is how far back, it was a DVD, was it?
Mm-hmm.
I've got this DVD, I'm going round to a friend's house. We're going to get a takeaway. If you want to come along, come. You don't need to say anything. You can, there'll be a couple of folk there. And for whatever reason, I'd answered the phone, and for whatever reason I said, yeah. And that kind of re-established, or gave Kirsty the opportunity to say, look, we know that you're going through this issue just now, let us help.
Yeah.
She knew somebody that had a flat. Next thing I know, I find myself in the flat. She knew that I was looking to do something other than drink, and I wanted to stay away from the drugs, and the people that I had known were still very toxic. She was still at Eagle's Wings at the time. Invited me to come back round. I had done a wee bit of volunteering for them before, but invited me to come back around. So I find myself on a fairly regular basis at that point, starting to volunteer. After a few months, I was still receiving benefits because of the injury on my leg at this point, and I'd milked it a fair bit.
That's an understatement, to be fair.
Not the injury was severe. I had healed to the extent where I should have been moving away from that. But it was easy. It meant I had money coming in that I didn't have to think about. And I got a letter through saying I had to come down for an assessment, and I went down, failed the assessment, rightly so. And immediately my head's like, I'm going to challenge that. How dare they do this to me? How dare they move me on at a time where I don't think I'm ready to move on? And Kirsty's like, why? What's stopping you from living this life that you say that you want to live? What is stopping you at this point? And that's what I needed. I needed somebody to be willing to challenge me. I needed somebody to do that in a way that it wasn't just pointing the finger for the sake of pointing the finger. The place that she was coming from, and also the place where a lot of the people that I'd then surrounded myself were coming from, was from a place of love and a place of care. And they were just looking to give me that gentle nudge in the direction that I needed to go in. At this point, nobody's saying you need to get yourself into church. At this point, nobody's saying that. I mean, that we were talking about the Bible, and I was finding myself into really in-depth conversations with like Ricky or Mike or a number of other people, in which they were allowing me to explore it and trip up as well. You know, it's the whole. There was points where I wanted to argue. There was points that I definitely didn't understand. There's still points that I don't understand whatsoever. But they allowed me to kind of explore it in a safe manner. After a few months, our friendship had grown to the point where any time that she was going out with friends or that to say grab a pizza, or it was a case of come along. We started spending more and more time with each other, whether it was through friends or whether it was in the drop-in, and that started to lead to.
It was just that time and that community, and that
it was
Just connection. I mean, I think it was also around that point where you realised that actually you'd moved away so much from a lot of those external influences, and for Mark, it was a bit of a shock when he realised that the people around him were Christians, the people that he cared about were Christians, the people he went to for support and advice were Christians, like the people that he actually enjoyed the company of were Christians.
And it didn't come from, we're trying to just indoctrinate you back into this
No,
belief.
it was-
The Christians around you played the long game and accidentally brought you back in.
The Christians around the Christians that I surrounded myself with acted in the way a Christian should.
Right.
I think that. So if I fast forward a wee while to the point where I wasn't I was attending Hill Bank, and we sat down. It was a midweek, and we sat down, and a booklet was provided, and it was kind of challenging thought on how we interact with people that are coming through the door. The first person is an ex-con, but he dresses smartly, he drives a nice car, he obviously has a wee bit of money, he's clean shaven and all this kind of stuff, and he's welcomed in because it's almost like, oh, you're one of us, you know, you present yourself quite well. After he goes for a couple of months, he sees the need to introduce his friends, who is still very much in the life that he previously lived, taking drugs, quite dishevelled, and maybe doesn't say the right things and do the right things. How do we treat that person? It was like exactly the same as we treat anybody else that's coming through that door. A job. I think in some ways we start to see ourselves, or not necessarily us as in, but just in general, we start to see ourselves as almost guardians of a building, because the church isn't the building. The building's just a temporary location for the church to be. The church are the people. And when it comes to it, if we want to see that church grow, if we want to see it become stronger, if we want to make sure that as many people as possible hear the good news, we can't turn anybody away that comes to the door. Regardless, if somebody comes to the door and asks to use the toilet, yeah, come in, pal. I'm not going to batter you about you should be reading your Bible or anything like that. First and foremost,
Quote me this verse, then you can use the back.
yeah, well, funny you should say that. I mean, if you think of the times where, or if I think of the times where I was attending places like soup kitchens and everything like that, there was one in particular. Thankfully, I believe that they've changed their practice. That the people that were coming in through the door had to sing, pray, and literally quote chapter and verse before they could get food. I learned to term that as conditional fellowship.
Right.
That wasn't Eagles, you should
that
clarify.
Wasn't Eagles.
That wasn't a good one.
No.
But yeah.
And I get where they were coming from. They wanted to teach people, they wanted people to open a Bible for a start. And they wanted people to discover Christ.
But we should be so steeped in it that we are.
And it sounds like, but what worked for you was just the church being what the church should be, which is just
there,
present in your lives,
and visible,
and caring, and consistently being there, even though it's not just a perfect, like the moment you start meeting your first Christian, all of a sudden everything starts to get, it's not that at all. It's, you're still going to have your ups and downs, and they were still with you all along the way, it sounds like. And that,
I mean, I think things got dramatically worse for you after you met all of us, because you ended up in well, yeah. But yeah, I think we have to be very clear with people that life does not become all, singing and dancing and everything works out and all your troubles disappear because you know Jesus, and
it will, but not necessarily.
Yeah, or is it that these things will still be there? You're just able to deal with them because you are assured of your salvation, because you know that actually no matter what you're going through, there's a home for you in heaven. And I think for us in the works that we're doing, and you're a bit more restricted in terms of sharing your faith at work, but for us, it's in that providing a safe space, providing a listening ear, a chat over a cup of tea. It's that they're not big, they're small acts of love. I'll often say, how many times do we read of Jesus stopping to talk to someone? It wasn't always big miracles, and it was often a conversation. It was often just giving a bit of his time and sharing a meal. And I think those are the practices that we need to be incorporating into our work with anybody, but especially people who are so broken and who are so lost and who just have no love for anything, cannot see any goodness in themselves at all. We need to be showing that to them.
Right.
And I think that's what we try to do, and it's certainly what we see from a lot of the services in Dundee, especially that are really rooted in the church as well. And if we're not doing that, we're doing it wrong. So.
Right. So just because you talked about the different services that are here in Dundee, I've been in Dundee all of, 4 hours my entire life now. Help me understand. Give me the short description of what is Dundee like? I asked you at the beginning, how would you describe you? How would you describe Dundee?
Dundee's an absolute beautiful city. Mm-hmm. And it's got some beautiful people in it.
It's got some very broken people in it as well.
Yeah, some of those beautiful people are incredibly broken. Mm-hmm. Just now, we've got a rising epidemic of drug use. I mean, in the past couple of weeks alone, the amount of people that we've been told have passed away that we've had direct connection with or worked alongside, and unfortunately the opportunity for them to change or to heal is no longer there. Dundee's also a very broken city, in which you'll have people that walk down the streets and purposely turn the other way when they see somebody in need.
Or take out their phone to take a photo.
Or just assume that somebody in distress is under the influence of drink or drugs.
Yeah.
Because of
there's
how
a
often it
lot of stigma. I mean, I think social media plays a massive part in that. Dundee is very well known in Scotland, but it's very well known because of its drug death rate, teen pregnancy rate, rates of domestic abuse, suicide rates. So there's a lot of really, really good stuff, but it's often very much blanketed by all this, really negative press and all these, top of the tables for all the worst things possible. So, yeah.
And I guess, and this will be, and I can kind of get to that question. How is the city responding to this from a people perspective, like the people of the city or the organizations that are in the city and the government? And is there working together? Is there limitations? Is there tension between the two, or?
And I think there's aspects of division. There's aspects of unity. There's a lot of connection. So in terms of, there's many different facets to the work. So you have a lot of the church groups who will run drop-ins. It's about providing food and comfort and that connection, the soup kitchens and things like that. And you have your groups who are working specifically about getting people into rehabs, working to address drug use, and you have your ones where it's, getting them onto the right medication treatment and things like that. So there are so many different parts and they all have a bit to play, but every single group there thinks that they're doing the most important part of the work. And that's not unique to Dundee, that's just how the world works, and it's just, I think that would be the same across Scotland. Exactly. So in terms of working alongside likes of government organisations and things like that, it's always going to be challenging because they have a political agenda. We don't. So we have a heavenly agenda, and they are always going to probably be at odds with each other. In terms of how we work alongside that, sometimes we have to be very careful, in what we're saying. I'm in a more unique position in the work that I do, in that I don't always have to be super careful with what I say or how I challenge things. And that, I don't work for a big statutory organisation who is government funded. So I have a wee bit more freedom and flexibility within that, which makes me a bit of an anomaly to then sit on likes of an advisory group within the government, because we're a small organisation, we're very much Dundee based, and we're not policy or procedure driven, we're people driven, and so to be able to reflect that accurately is is a challenge. But I always think it comes back to that thing of it's, the whole reason I'm on it is because somebody else nominated me. So, I in no way put myself forward for that. Right. But it was because somebody has seen the work that has been done and thought, that would be a really good, and well placed in. And so, it's really good because you can challenge and you bring a different viewpoint. And so, it's because it's clinical focus, so it's a lot of sort of high up medical people with very big titles and, with years and years and years of experience, and an absolute wealth of knowledge. And I will often sit and go, but the people we talk to or the people we are working with. So I always see my role there is to be the voice of the folk that we are working with, because otherwise they're quite often not heard.
And that seems to be kind of the case across the board. It's easy to look at big numbers and statistics and read this study or that study, but when you actually talk to the people, that's where you really see.
Absolutely. And these are people who are hurt. They're hurt by a system, they're hurt by the policies, they're hurt by the statistics, they're broken families, the ripple effect of one drug death is huge. The impact that has on so many different parts of them, their family, their community, and every other service that they have been part of. It's always a huge loss. And I think when we just talk in broad terms of statistics and numbers of people and, these terrible rates and all of that, we lose sight of that was somebody's daughter, that was somebody's son, that was somebody's mum or dad. And so that's what we want to keep really at the heart of it. And, to be remembering we're doing this work, for God, for the people. And we need to keep that at the centre of it.
I love that. And so I have 3 more questions for you. 3 more questions. So one, because you talked about, because I'm already getting I'm talking too much. So 3
That
more.
was Mark,
So
not plain Mark.
So we'll go rapid fire through these 3.
Yeah.
Okay? So from a policy perspective, we'll talk policy, then we'll talk church, and then I want one last question for just the 2 of you. So policy, what are the things that you think could be most helpful from that policy position? Because you talk policies hurt people or the systems hurt people. What are some of the things that maybe y'all are hopeful that could happen from a policy perspective?
I think that's a really difficult one because policies are, especially at government level, are always going to be national. And actually what in an ideal world with an ideal setup is that they would be localised. So a lot of the issues we are seeing in Dundee are actually quite unique because Dundee's a small city, it's a big village really, it's not like Glasgow or Edinburgh. And so we do see difference in drug trends and things, but what you see is there's a more connected part in Dundee. So, you write a policy that would work really well in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and you find actually it's just not really hitting the mark in Dundee. So one of the big things is like a drug consumption room, for people to go and safely administer drugs in a controlled environment with medical staff there. Now that works really well, and I know that it's a big, and there's a big political debate about it as well. The reality is that for some people they need that, right? If you were to take that and lift it and put it into Dundee, it wouldn't work. We're not seeing the same levels of people injecting drugs, and we don't have the same volume of issues as what they were seeing to have established that in Glasgow, right? So, that's a very, very simplified sort of chat on it, but, and it's far more complicated than that, and everybody has their own personal opinion on it. But policy is really, really difficult because you're trying to make something that keeps the majority of people safe, and really that is what it comes down to, is they're trying to implement things to keep people safe, whether it's staff, whether it's people using drugs, whatever it might be. So it's really difficult, and I see, it's a difficult place to work within because you're trying to represent both.
Right.
Stemming from that though, totally agree with everything you said, and on top of that, because policy and what we're doing is driven by government on one level, by the time that government catches up to what's actually happening, it's changed.
Yeah.
So
we're already about 6 years behind drug trends in terms of stuff that we're doing. So
instead of going big, broad,
you need to paint with finer brushes.
Yeah.
Realistically, what it comes down to is it takes quite possibly years for government policy to put things into place, whereas if it was done on a more local level, you can see what's happening in Dundee, see what's happening in Edinburgh, Glasgow.
And so we're excited about getting the church more equipped to be involved. What is a way that the church can improve and be better at supporting people who are struggling with?
I think they need to be more visible is probably a big thing. Churches shouldn't be hidden behind walls. We should be out in the communities. We should be known as this is a place you can go if you're struggling. This is a place you can go if you're hurt. This is a place you can go to get advice or support or whatever it might be that you're needing or looking for. So I think we need to get out from the buildings and get out into the communities. And ultimately, church should be about connection. If we're not connecting to the people that Jesus has told us to go and spread the word to, then we're missing the mark in more ways than one, not just with this work that we're doing, but as disciples, we're not doing it right. So we need to get out there.
I firmly believe that there's a man called Johann Hari. You might know him, you might not.
I use one of his quotes all the time.
So it might be this one.
I want to hear it. I'm not going to tell you which one it is.
So the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
It's connection.
Yeah.
Human connection. Use that one all the time.
Yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
It's also something that we're designed to do. God had in mind that we stand in fellowship with each other. We do that by connecting with others. We do that by sharing what Christ has done with us, sharing the Bible, but just sharing time, sharing a cup of tea.
The Lord
which is what happened with you.
Yeah.
Like, that's your story.
Yeah.
Still not entirely sure if God's punishing me.
You'll find out one day.
So, last thing I have for you. What excites you? What are you excited about right now?
I'm excited to see things continuing to develop. I mean, I think, in terms of what we have access to, so, being able to go in as a parish nurse and also in a volunteering role with Prison Fellowship to deliver courses and sit down and meet with women specifically, but also then support them out into community. That's a fantastic opportunity. That's a really rare opportunity as well, and I'm very aware that doesn't happen everywhere, but for us here in Dundee, that's amazing. I think we're seeing a real movement of work within churches. We're seeing young folk coming in and being under the word and getting saved, and so yeah, it excites me to see what God has planned next.
I think when I heard you ask this question, my immediate thought was nothing. It's brutal. It's like pushing water uphill sometimes. But then when I sit and think about it, actually what I'm excited about is seeing the next person that walks through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it blows your mind that, I never thought I'd see you here. And then that challenges my thinking on, why not? Everybody belongs here, so welcome the man.
Yeah.
That's an amazing. I'm going to stop it right there. That's perfect. That's exactly how we should be. Thank you guys for saying that.
Thank you very much.
This was great.
This has been a podcast powered by Uplift Appalachia. To learn more, you can find us at upliftappalachia.org or at Uplift Appalachia on Instagram.